And hello and welcome to the Iron Mountain Hour. My name is Cliff. I'm joined tonight by
Dustin.
howdy. We appreciate y'all joining us. This is our 14th episode tonight. Tim's not with us because he was out of town, so Dustin joined me to get into the topic tonight, which is going to be law enforcement. There's a whole lot of different sides to the argument on this one. Some people pretty extreme either way, either in favor of or in opposition to law enforcement. I kind of find myself in the middle of both of those camps, and sometimes I'll have some people call me a bootlicker, and other people call me an anarchist.
At the same time.
Yeah, and I don't really think either of those is accurate for me, because I do feel there is some kind of role for law enforcement in a civil society if we're going to follow the rules that we have enacted right now. But at the same time, I definitely find a lot of merit to the argument that I'm responsible for my own safety, and I pretty much am, even with law enforcement in place. I do like the idea of having people who are trained to take on, some kind of crazy person with a, vendetta against society. I'd prefer that I not have to do that to myself, but at the same time, usually when something like that happens, it's citizens that a lot of times take care of it. You see this all the guy down at the church shooting in Texas. He was taken out by an armed citizen. Actually, a couple of church shootings, I think both of those were in Texas, and an armed citizen stopped those shootings.
Several public ones, like whenever that spree of like the Walmart shootings was going on, like that one, there were several of them that were stopped by citizens. Lots of them, they don't ever get airtime, so you don't really know when they're happening unless you look them up. But
sorry, folks, technical difficulties tonight. Some of the equipment that I was using to get the show started, I actually decided to update right at time for the show to start. So we kind of scrambled to get it together, and we were 6 minutes late getting on. But I'm actually going to try to be here at 10 o'clock regularly on Sunday nights, so you'll know right where to find us and know when to tune in, and you can make it part of your routine to hang out with us. But if not, you can always watch the show later and share it. But I'd like to try to get people tuning in while we do it live. That way we can have some audience participation. Tell us what you think about it. I'll read your chats on here if you have something to say about it. If you tell us something we don't know, that could really add to the conversation. So what made me think to bring this topic up this week was a story that I saw in, it happened in Tusculum. There was a police chase that started in Tusculum, and it went all the way up to Jonesboro, and somebody ended up dying because they were chasing this guy, and he plowed into somebody. I think he ran a red light or something. I'll share the story in the description, but the cops chasing him up there from Tusculum, they said he had threatened to go commit a violent crime, so that's why they were chasing him. He was going through town at 104 miles per hour, and that they had been called that the car was stolen and that he was going to go hurt somebody, and he didn't have any plates on the car. When they went to pursue him, of course he kept running and ran all the way to Jonesboro, where he ran over somebody. And the other agencies, the other law enforcement agencies up the road there in Johnson City and Jonesboro, and the Washington County police, they weren't notified about it. I think one of them, Washington County, was notified about 8 minutes before the crash. So these guys down here in Tusculum, a lot of people are saying, they were trying to be heroes and, do a high-speed police chase and catch somebody. And I don't know what their motivation was. They say they were trying to prevent further crime, and I can only take them at their word at them or not. I can't. I don't know what's on their mind. But I've always been somebody who's not in favor of doing a really fast police chase, because the odds are
someone's getting seriously injured or dead.
Yeah, and maybe somebody who's not involved in the chase. Is people don't have training, including cops. Their training is very minimal to drive 100 and, today's cars, your average car on the road today will go 120, 30 miles an hour, and your above average ones will go up to 180, 200 miles an hour. And the cop cars, those things are pretty fast too. So you got a lot of potential for somebody to slip up and cause some major damage to property or life. So it just kind of seems like common sense to me to back off. We've got communication these days from, you could get it to the next county over and let them know, hey, there's a guy flying up here. You might want to be ready for him, and let's see if we can stop him that way, instead of trying to chase him down and pit maneuver him and spin him out somewhere. Which you've seen, I've seen, cops do that to like minivans with moms in them before for not stopping quick enough on the interstate, and flip the van over. Crazy stuff. So I don't. It's kind of hard for me to not sound like I'm very anti-law enforcement, because I generally don't have a lot of good things to say about law enforcement. But
as a whole, yeah.
yeah, but I think here's where I think they have it wrong in a couple of different ways, or specifically the ACAB guys. The whole idea that the calling for the death of all police officers and things like that, I think that's pretty obvious. I don't wish that on anybody. But I think they also have it wrong in what they think police actually are. And in one of the reasons that I'm not a total anarchist is I kind of like the idea of a justice system. Because in an anarchical society, I guess, unless you could have private justice systems or something like that, or commercial justice, I'm not sure I'm a big fan of that. Or you could have mob violence, and I'm definitely not a big fan of that, mob justice and lynch mobs and things like that. So I think the justice system that we have is kind of a happy medium, or maybe an unhappy medium, because I do think it gets a lot of things wrong. But I think one of the most important things about it is the trial by jury, the right for the state, if they're going to accuse you of something, they have to prove to a group of 12 people that you did this. And I know a lot of times they trick the juries, but at least there's that barrier there. A lot of times juries, don't understand the law. Most people don't. It's written by lawyers, and there's millions probably of pages of code. I don't know how many pages, but there's a bunch of different code when you add state, federal, and local law enforcement. I read something years ago that the average person can, just your average law-abiding citizen, actually commits 7 felonies on a daily basis without even realizing it. And yeah, the article went on to detail, kind of how you might do that without realizing it. But that's kind of one of my main beefs with the law enforcement is they have so much to enforce.
There's too much.
Yeah. And to get back to where I think the ACAB folks have it wrong is the purpose of the law enforcement is actually to make sure that you get that fair trial. More than they are to even prevent crime, I think in most cases, is to protect the rights of the accused when, say you're accused of robbing your neighbor, and the neighbor is ready to come after you and he shoot you or beat your ass or whatever to take your stuff back, and you didn't take his stuff. I guess that's not that good an example, but say you were accused of murdering somebody, they didn't know who did it, and you just happened to be walking around in the area, and instead of the mob just saying, hey, this guy was there, there's a whole lot more to the story, but a jury trial gives you the right to present your side, and you have to be proven guilty. But the purpose of law enforcement is actually to apprehend you safely and stop you from being harmed before you've been proven guilty in the court of law. So that's kind of what I like law enforcement for, because I do feel like everybody has the right to a fair trial. That's pretty important if we're going to have a society where we all have to follow the law and we're all expected to uphold these norms. Then I think that's an important part of it, and it has to go both ways. What do you think?
I agree there. There's definitely, yeah, there's too much overreach in all of it, but I do agree. We all need, when something does go awry or something, you'd like to know that you're like, hey, I get to have a chance to say my side, and you get to, I guess, stand trial.
Yeah. Well, and I don't really know that as far as a lot of people expect kind of law enforcement to stop crime, and I don't know that they're really able to do that. Um, in the Tennessee Constitution, the role, or Tennessee Code, the role of the sheriff is laid out, and that is one of his duties that's put in there, is to stop crime and be patrol the roadways and keep an eye out for crime and stop any of it. And that's in Tennessee. Now other states don't have those provisions, and in a lot of places the police are more there to write the reports and take the people to jail. That's why some places were moved to protect and serve from their cop cars.
Dude, they changed the sheriff patrol's cars. I don't think they say it on them anymore.
Yeah.
I think they removed that on the new paint scheme.
Yeah, a lot of different localities have done that, and in California right now, some of the crime, especially in like downtown Los Angeles, is so bad. You've got the sheriff of L.A. County. He's instituting, or he's issuing concealed carry permits, and the state government's trying to stop that. But he's telling people, if we can't protect you, you need to protect yourself.
I think they said that it's like 100 times or so more than what the old sheriff did within their reign.
And that's that's a good thing that because people have needed that in Los Angeles for a long time. But that just shows you kind of how ineffective police are when. Like in certain areas of California, like San Francisco, for example, they can't even prosecute people who don't steal more than $900 worth of stuff. So the police can't even go after these guys. If you're a shop owner, you're not allowed to stop them yourself. You'll be charged with assault. Or if you call the police, they're not going to come after them unless they steal $900 worth of your stuff. So some of these places, Walgreens, I think, shut down a whole bunch of stores in San Francisco. So old folks that live in San Francisco can't get medicines. People who worked there lost their jobs, and so if the police, what are the police even there for at that point? If they're not allowed to stop property crime.
In that, it's like they're hurting the law-abiding people,
right? So
in those accents.
So that kind of gets me to, during some of the riots that happened in 2020, you saw several cases of people being a group of people would show up at their house, start throwing things at their house or walking across their property, intimidating them, and they would actually get arrested for pulling out a gun, not even shooting anybody. And it's like, so the cops, they're not stopping people from marching through your property and destroying, throwing bricks at your windows and things like that. But they stop you when you try to stop them. So it kind of seems like these areas where that happened, the local enforcement policy kind of makes all the difference. So we don't really see that in our area, as far as we didn't really see a lot of the looting and burning or anything like that. You saw some protesting, and that was fine. But I think when people, I don't think they put up with them even standing blocking traffic here. That seems like the Johnson City police, put an end to it pretty quick. But because so that maybe kind of speaks. I'm not really a fan of the Johnson City police, but as far as what happened, the results of that wave of violent activity during last summer, we didn't see any of that here. Again, I'm not a fan of necessarily a lot of those tactics, but it was effective, at least it appeared to be, at stopping a lot of that stuff. So a lot of people would say that if that shows what happens when you remove the police from those situations, you end up with, city blocks burning and looting, and there were, I think, 36 people killed in those, different riots across the country. So and then you've got those cities like a lot of big cities this year had, or last year had, the highest number of murders ever.
Mm-hmm.
So there's been a lot going on with the police. It's been a big topic in the news and in society. Since, of course, we go back to the George Floyd, that's kind of where it really came to a head. But really, it had been building for years and years.
A long time.
You started seeing. I know I definitely shared my share of them on Facebook back in the early days. 2008, 9, 10. The cop block pages, the police the police pages, the Free Thought Project. A lot of those they've all been banned from Facebook, but we shared those things around, and they got boosted by the Facebook algorithms, to where a lot of people, probably a little bit younger than us, got the idea that that's all the police do is beat people up and throw flashbangs into their house and shoot their dogs and all this crazy stuff that you see police do. And there's definitely a lot of it, but at the same time, it kind of there seems to be at least some validity to the idea that these thin blue line people have, that that is the kind of the line that holds civilization together. Because in a lot of places you saw where that was removed, look at Seattle, the hell that place descended into when they stopped enforcing all the laws and kind of let those guys take over. You had, it just looked awful. There were a couple of murders in there on their watch. I'm all for. I should say I'm all for people having autonomous zones if they want to. I'm just not all for them taking them over by force from someone else's property.
Mm-hmm.
That's really the problem I have with it. I think individual communes with their own security details, I think I have no problem with that, as long as they're not harming kids and everybody there is consenting. I have no problem whatsoever with that.
I don't disagree with it.
but these guys were, they were taking over buildings that weren't theirs, and they're like locked the cops in the courthouse and started trying to burn it down and stuff like that. So I couldn't support that, but I do think that there's definitely a lot of merit to arguments against the police. In fact, in preparing for tonight's show, Dustin and I were kind of having a lot harder time coming up with reasons why we would,
the pro side of it,
support the police. So we're kind of really reaching here. One of the things that we were looking at in the research for it was the civil asset forfeiture, which has been a big problem for a long time. Matter of fact, in 2015, I think 2020, the police actually seized more assets from people who may not have even been convicted of a crime than burglars did. I mean, I think it was $68 billion or $6.8 billion over the last 20 years that police took from people, and that's a problem when you see that money going back into the police department, and that if they seize a Lamborghini, then the detective's driving a Lamborghini around while he's on the job, or there's extra money going back into the department for their undercover guys to.
If someone has $1,000 on them because they're going to buy something and they get pulled over and then they think that's suspicious, they'll take the money.
Yeah,
that's not cool.
No, and when they go through the airport, it gets really bad. I forget what the law is. I think it's $10,000 you have to check in an airport before you can fly with it. But you're all the time seeing them take people's money. But either way, a lot of times when people try to check it, they get it seized too. And there was an example I read about last week. A woman who was fleeing an abusive relationship. She took her children and drained the bank accounts, got $70,000 in cash, and the cops pulled her over and took it all. And she was suing to try to get it back. But she wasn't suspected of any crime. They just said there was no reason for her to have that much cash. What was she doing, selling drugs or what? And that's
none of their business.
Yeah,
that part.
That's right.
That's her private property. I mean,
And they probably really had no reason to be searching her. There was a group that I looked at.
which that can fall into our last week's about in the constitutional side of it, and shouldn't be doing that.
No, and they violated the Fourth Amendment. Probably. I mean, I don't know the specifics of the case, but they probably violated the Fourth Amendment by searching her in the first place. If she was not accused of any crime, not suspected of any crime, then why were they looking through her stuff, and what were they looking for? That's one of the whole reasons that they even wrote that amendment, is because the governors for the colonies would just write sweeping warrants back in the Revolutionary days, to where you're allowed to search this guy for whatever you want. So they said, no, you have to actually have suspicion that you have to have reasonable suspicion that somebody's done something wrong, and then you also have to say where and we're going to search and what we're looking for. You can't just go in there and find any old thing. Like if I'm looking for, I think you've stolen something, and then I go in there and I see what I consider to be, I don't know, an illegal substance. Let's say
contraband of some sort.
Yeah, contraband of some sort. I can't arrest you for that contraband because that's not what I'm there for. I'm there for that stolen property, which gets me back around to law enforcement. I mean, I like the idea of being able to, if somebody steals my property, there's the idea that, oh, I can call law enforcement and they'll get my property back, but most of the time they don't. And then it kind of puts you in a conundrum, because then if you go to try to get your property back yourself, then you probably have to go on someone else's property and risk getting a trespass or maybe even assault charge if you're on their property and you say, hey, give me my shit back, and they take a swing at you, and then you defend yourself, then you're probably still going to get the assault charge because you're on their property. So that side, the law enforcement kind of tends to put you in a worse place with retrieving your property than if there wasn't law enforcement. Now, I guess that's, I don't know.
That is like a catch-22 kind of spot, because it's like, darned if you do, darned if you don't. It's like you go through the right way with them, it's like you probably won't get it back and have to have stuff tied up for who knows how long. And if you go and you know that someone did it and you get it back, you could still get in trouble for going and getting it back.
I actually, when I was younger, I did have a radio, stereo stolen from my car, and they busted my window. So in order to get my insurance claim, I had to file a police report. And when I did, they actually did bring me my stereo back. But that's been the only time I've ever had stolen property returned to me. I've had several cars broken into over the years, and one of them, they stole my NES, my original NES. I had a shoebox full of games. All the classics, Metroid and both Zeldas and Final Fantasy and Castlevanias. And
God, those cartridges can go for good amounts.
I'm sure they could go for quite a bit now. Probably because everybody got theirs stolen or thrown away. But yeah, and I actually, here's another personal story. And again, I swear I don't hate law enforcement because of this, but this the law enforcement actually stole my car one time.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard this one.
Yeah, I had a car breakdown. It was a Mercedes, and this car was my pride and joy, and I had it about halfway paid off, and I was driving through Johnson City, and I had a belt break, and when I got in there and got a new belt and put it on at the AutoZone parking lot, it wouldn't turn. Turned out my fan clutch bearing bracket was out, so I had to order this from Germany. This was back in the early 2000s, where there was not internet quickness. I mean, it was there, but I had to order it from Germany. So I went through AutoZone. They did that. Took it a week. When I got back there, they called me. My car was gone, but I had gone around to the whole parking lot and said, you're not going to tow my car, are you? And they all told me no. I even went to the people that owned the parking lot. So I get back and my car's gone. I go around and I talk to them all again. I say, hey, did you tow my car? No, everybody says no, we didn't tow it. So I said, well, I guess it's been stolen. I call 911 and made a report. Turns out 2 weeks later they call me and they say, oh, we found your car. It's at the Browns Mill Tow Yard or whatever. And I go up there and they say, oh yeah, and the cops when they call me they said the Amico had it towed. So Amico, there's no Amico for miles around there. When I went to go to the tow yard, they say, oh yeah, Johnson City 911 had this towed. So they went on to private property, saw a car sitting there, and called one of their buddies probably that they got a tow referral for, and had them tow it. It ended up, being more money. I was young and working at the time. It was more than I could afford to get it back. So I ended up losing the car because of it. So, but there's no reason for. I mean, when a guy can abuse his authority like that, he has too much authority.
When especially on private property, and everyone else was like, "It's cool.
Yeah,
You told us. Hey, we'll know it's there."
yeah, and that's just a very mild abuse of authority, and there's much worse. We could probably get into a lot worse. Um,
I guess this isn't personal, and I'll leave it sort of like vague. But I did have a friend who, when they were younger, they were sexually abused, and people, they kept trying to claim it, and this is kind of like a pro thing. The law enforcement was the one that actually got the perpetrator caught,
there you go.
and like, yeah, we like to like especially think of communities as being able to come together instead of having to need as much need on a law enforcement. But she was like, they didn't. No one around them helped. No one helped, and the law enforcement was the one that actually
Well, there
caught
are.
them.
Yeah, you're right. There are a lot of times, especially with children, that people want to stick their nose in other people's business, and I can appreciate that. But there that's really probably the only time I would call law enforcement now is for. I mean, of course, to make a traffic accident report or something if I had to do that. But is if I thought someone was hurting someone or hurting a child, I would probably um, hesitate to call for almost anything else. They just seem when you have an issue, an argument, and the police show up, it almost always escalates the situation. So I don't tend to recommend people do that for arguments with your family. But so many people do that, and I don't really know what the solution to that is, because it seems like our culture and our society is really going downhill in a lot of ways, and that's I guess one of the reasons that I still feel like law enforcement does have a role. I personally couldn't be a law enforcement officer. I couldn't enforce victimless crimes. I yeah, I mean, if somebody's breaking into houses and stealing your money and stuff, I'm all for getting that guy. But for the guy who's smoking pot, or for the guy who's even shooting up in his basement, I mean, I think he definitely has a detrimental effect on society in a lot of ways. And you could argue that he's not hurting just himself, but at the same time, he is just hurting himself directly. And I mean, if he's not neglecting any children or animals, or getting screwed up on it and beating up his spouse or whatever, then
Or getting out in public and endangering the public.
That's a different situation. But I don't think personally. I don't even think your blood alcohol content should really matter. If you're endangering somebody, what's it matter? Reckless endangerment should be the statute, no matter what. In my opinion, the reason for it is, whether it's because you're, just immature and turning around and looking in your back seat while you're driving and going 100 miles an hour through town, you run over somebody. Why is that any better than if you're drunk? To me, it's not any better. Whatever the reason is, you're still doing something that's dangerous and violent in that case. But either way, I think we should go more towards enforcement of crimes with an actual victim.
Mm-hmm. I'm in agreement there fully. I mean,
well, and it's like there's so many stories again where we were looking. We see the way that the public has perceived law enforcement has really changed over the last 2 years, especially because up until um, up until the pandemic started, I guess most conservatives kind of viewed law enforcement as that's something that you don't touch. You better not even say anything disrespectful about law enforcement. But then they started seeing, mothers being arrested for not wearing a mask going onto the train. They started seeing people being kicked out of places, for refusing to wear a mask, or for maybe in a lot of places they weren't allowed to sell certain things at the store. Their gyms were not allowed to be open, and they were like, "Oh, this is not essential business." But I bet you to the people who run that business and depend on that to survive, they
pretty damn essential.
yeah, and so the law enforcement was used to enforce those lockdown policies, and a lot of conservatives at that time started saying, "Wait a minute," and this is what we had been talking about in kind of the well. I was more with the liberals on this in the early 2000s. This is what the Patriot Act is going to be used for later on. Is all these extra powers you're giving law enforcement? One day this is going to turn on you, and I think we're seeing some of that with a lot of the kind of more conservative cops have quit over the last couple years, and you've probably got more people on there who are ideologically more, not necessarily liberal but we'll say left driven, and other people who just are there for the paycheck. And the cops have always kind of, it's been a place where a lot of psychopaths like to go work. I mean, I'm not saying there's a large percentage of psychopaths or cops, but a large percentage of, or not saying a large percentage of cops are psychopaths, but a large percentage of psychopaths are cops, maybe. That's what I should say.
It's a way to legally get their power trip.
Yeah, exactly. And so you always saw that kind of person drawn to law enforcement, but a lot of the norms that kind of restricted law enforcement, um, we'll see those go out the window. I feel like with pandemic enforcement, if you look at, I was going to pull up some video and stuff tonight, but we didn't really have time for that. We kind of just threw this show together. But you can look in, I mean, you can Google it, and maybe if I feel froggy after, I'll put it in the description. But you can look in Germany, the police are beating the crap out of people.
France, they're doing it too.
Yeah, Austria, New Zealand and Australia are really bad right now. Canada, there's a few countries out there. Poland, I think, is doing pretty good with it. They've said they're not gonna do this stuff. A couple of, I think maybe the Czech Republic was also on that. Some of these Eastern European countries that were really under the boot of communism have kind of they've seen this before. Yeah, we've never seen this in America, so I think a lot of people are caught off guard. Not only have we been getting heavily propagandized for about 20 years, you had the right wing really propagandized to back law enforcement, and then
perfect dichotomy between it.
And then you had the left wing exactly on the opposite. But yeah, you're right. I think it's being used more as a divide and conquer strategy than anything.
And hit earlier, I saw something. You know how you said people are wanting to get like more weapons permits, like in LA and all that stuff. And now the people that voted for these anti-gun policies, when they see, oh crap, things are getting bad, I would like to have a weapon to protect myself. And then they're like, wait, you have to do this, and I can't do this, but I need this to help me.
I'm not
and
a
then
criminal.
they're seeing that their policies being enforced are actually being detrimental.
Hey, we got some comments here from B. She says, I don't hate police officers. I hate the way they are used. And Vacant Josh says, I agree with B. But are trials really fair? The average American is guilty until proven innocent. Yeah, I agree with everything they said there. I don't think trials a lot of times work out the way they should. But we every now and then we see a couple of big examples of, the justice system prevailing. But I think it's a better shot than not having that but I don't know what the best thing is. But my thing is, this has been used as a divide and conquer strategy. Is my opinion on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the only way that we can defeat this is to meet in the middle somehow. And the best way of doing that, I think, is to elect. I just noticed we can hear our voices echoing in that guitar behind
Yeah,
us.
I thought I've noticed that.
Yeah, I was wondering what that was. But I think the best way that we can meet in the middle on it is to, if we're going to have the police officers and have them tasked with upholding a civil society, then we should be looking at ways to remove the burden from those police officers of enforcing crimes that are not really detrimental to. There's no direct victim to them, and I think that means an end to the war on drugs. I think that means an end to firearms law enforcement for most part. I mean, if you look at the Ruby Ridge incident, for example, that was, I think it was it the ATF or the FBI that did the shooting. I can't remember. It was a federal law enforcement agency. They shot a 14-year-old boy. They shot a woman holding an infant, and the woman died. And it was all over the length of a shotgun barrel.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we'd be a lot better off without these guys enforcing these unconstitutional laws. That's why, I mean, again, we go back to, I'm not one of these guys who lives and dies by the Constitution. I kind of think it gave the government more power than it really needed to have, but at the same time, it did restrain it to those certain powers, and the idea theoretically was to keep government from doing things that weren't listed in there. But now they do so many of those things that
I also still think, like when people say they do need a little more accountability, so whenever, that'll keep them from wanting to, I guess, do some of the bad things that we've heard.
Yeah,
well, law enforcement, they need to be held more accountable on certain aspects.
I don't know enough about the whole qualified immunity debate to really choose a side on that, but it sounds like that's something that they shouldn't have. It sounds like you should be able to sue the police in any instance. I mean, even no matter what the case is, you should be able to sue them. I mean, and have them and prove the merits of your case.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely have a problem with that, especially if they take your stuff and you can't sue them to get it back, or if they, like this UPS driver. That was one of the stories we were going to look at. There was a UPS driver who got taken hostage back in, I think it was not 2019, maybe 2020. But these criminals took a UPS driver hostage, and the cops killed him and shot a bunch of cars and stuff like that.
Yeah, that was a disaster.
and the UPS there's 6 police agencies being sued over it. There was a jewelry store robbery, and they jumped into this UPS truck and took off, and the cops ended up killing the guy.
Well, the driver
of the UPS truck, yeah, the innocent bystander. So, I mean, would it really been that bad of a thing to let the jewelry store driver or robbers get away for then? I mean, they could probably, with today's investigative tactics, track them down after the fact. And if they didn't, well, I think that loss of those jewels, which would probably be mostly compensated by insurance, even though there is a deductible, and I'm not just saying, oh, they got insurance, what's the big deal? I'm just saying that's a lot better to have somebody pay an insurance deductible than have someone innocent lose their life. And then the cops, they file their report and move on either way.
And I'm like, in a lot of the modern, like you said, with our modern technologies involved in it, they could have still probably have got them later on down the road.
Yeah.
If it was in an urban area, if you could have got a helicopter, they're not going to be going, super far, super fast that you could outrun them.
Right.
Eyes in the sky kind of deal. Especially if they're in a UPS truck, it's kind of obvious where it's going.
Yeah, the UPS truck is tracked anyway.
I was I was about to say they have GPS trackers in them, so it's like.
So yeah, but I know there are a lot of people who are, have family in law enforcement or who work in law enforcement, and they're good people and they do good things. You know, like you said, because they stop people that hurt children, and they you know they do sometimes put people away who are dangerous people. I mean, actually, there was a lot of dangerous people in jail. So uh, you watch the show Cops. You know, a lot of times those people are kind of more funny than anything. But
Yeah.
every now and then, you know, you'll see that you know, they're actually doing some good out there. So
And I do know a few people that are in law enforcement that they're doing it for the right
yeah,
reasons. They want to help the community, which I feel that's there's a disconnect there too. It's like if you could get cops back to like a less militarized feel and how it kind of used to be, they're more of a pillar in a community.
agreed.
That would definitely draw things more together.
Yeah,
Which,
because you used to, like in the 50s, you would teach your children, hey, there's the police officer, you know, smile at them and wave and do whatever they say. And now it's like, don't talk to the cops, kid.
mm-hmm.
You don't know what they might, just stay away from. The you know, mentality's totally changed on it.
which in a lot of cases it's not to be. It's not. You can't blame them.
No, no. As you never know what you might incriminate yourself with, or what you know they might decide to. Uh, I was just watching some videos on YouTube of what's his name, Upchurch, the redneck, the rapper,
Yeah.
and he lives in Ashland City, and he had a cop, the same cop, pulling him over and over again for different things. He pulled him over, or he didn't even pull him over. He came up behind him at the Sonic right about the time dude was getting his food and turned his blue lights on. Like, you know why I pulled you over? He's like, you didn't pull me over. It turned out dude was stalking his social media and seeing where he was going to be, and then going there. And then he'd pull him over like in the middle of the night. He pulled him over for a window tint, and he got Upchurch got all this on video, and he pulled him over for a window tint. But it turned out he had watched his social and was waiting on him there. And when he pulled him over, it was dark. He couldn't even really see the window tint. He goes and gets the tool that gauges it or whatever, and it comes up 0%. And he writes him a ticket anyway, and then then he pulls him over like 3 times over the course of it. It's just harassing him. So, gosh, I was trying to get back to the good stuff police do, but you were talking about the militarization and the technology. It kind of led me into that. But you do see a lot of police departments they're having they have Humvees and you know a lot of tactical gear and M4 carbines and things like that. You know, they don't want us to have those, but they want the police to have them to come after people. And I don't think it's cool even for them to really be running around in tactical gear and camouflage, you know, looking like military, because we're not supposed to have standing armies in this country. And what's the difference between, you know, a standing army if whether they're wearing an army badge or a, you know, sheriff's department badge, whatever? What's it matter if they're still patrolling the streets in a military uniform, carrying military gear, driving military equipment? That's effectively a standing army. It's
like a loophole in it.
Yeah, it's a de facto standing army. And you know, Ron DeSantis down in Florida, he made a lot of fuss the last couple of weeks where he announced he was going to start a state guard of 200 people in Florida, and a lot of people were saying, "Yeah, go Florida. That's how we do it. You know, they'll show them." And a lot of other people were saying, "Oh, that's what the National Guard's for. You don't need that." But a lot of states already have a state guard, including Tennessee. We actually have a 500-person volunteer state guard. And they're kind of just like the National Guard for the governor to call up, and they usually use them for, you know, emergencies, stuff like that, the tornadoes and stuff that, you know, they just had up in there in Kentucky. I haven't heard a lot about that, but unfortunately there was a lot of big storms this weekend, a lot of damage. I'm sure some people died as bad as the damage was. Haven't had a chance to look into it really.
I don't remember. I can't say what the numbers were I don't remember. Just heard it in passing.
But when something like that happens to a community, that's one of the times, you know, that law enforcement is a good thing, because They can set up order. They can help people get out. They can keep chaos from coming. I mean, it's already chaos, but they can kind of help guide people back to some sort of order and some sort of uh, way out of a situation like that. They go through and look for survivors,
And where they're already a central kind of thing, they can have they can get the communications out to help
yeah,
wrangle things back in.
yeah. So I think if we're going to continue to have a civilized society, and by which I mean one that's administrated by government bodies on the local and state level, we kind of have to have realistic expectations for what we want them to do. And as part of law enforcement, I think we should have more things like that, where they're the guys they're the first responders. They're the guys who want to go out there and help people, want to um, want to even put their lives on the line to defend their communities and make them strong. I think that's a great thing, and there should be a place in our society for that. Um, you could argue over how you get there, what kind of society it is, but at the same time, uh, a society needs some sort of guardians because there are bad people in the society, and it's just the plain facts that not everybody is able to defend themselves or protect themselves
Mm-hmm.
at the level that Dustin or I might be able to. So there are probably a lot of people who do need the police and do need some sort of protection and some sort of someone to call when something happens. So there's definitely a place for them, but we need to have realistic expectations, and we need to have a goal of where we want to go as a society and what we want them to do. And I don't think things like enforcing political measures and
As we say, victimless crimes.
yeah, victimless crimes. Um, I don't think that's what we want them to do, and I definitely don't think we want them enforcing public health mandates, because that is a terribly dangerous way to go.
It's body on them. I can't say the word.
Bodily autonomy,
Yes.
habeas corpus. The right to your own self, to your own person.
Which all your private property rights stem from yourself. So
That's
it's
right.
That's core.
That's right.
Breaking that.
So, I definitely see both sides of the argument here, both sides of the debate. But I think to fall too far on the extreme of either is going to be a mistake. Um, and again, we go back to it's all about our local communities, because as bad as what happened up in Minneapolis last year was, there was really that went and spread across the whole country, and what really happened from it. I mean, what good came from the awareness of it. I don't think there's been a lot of good police reform from it, and I mean, you had a lot of riots and things, but Minneapolis, actually, I just saw they defunded their police some, but it was kind of more of a token giveaway kind of thing, and then they've just refunded them to the level they were before now, because a lot of the crime went up there. So we as we get back around, not a whole lot's changed since before then. We're back to they're asking the laws in the law enforcement in some places to enforce these COVID laws, and a lot of them are not doing it. In California, even it's kind of the law enforcement said they're not going to do that, and I think that's a good thing, and I think we're starting to see some limits put on them in some states. So I'm kind of rambling here a bit, but I'm trying to wind it up
Could be wrong. Isn't there stuff in it that if the laws are unjust, you're not really supposed to?
Yeah, there is.
I forgot what exactly that is. Where it's exactly located.
Well, we decided in the Nuremberg Code, or the Nuremberg trials after World War II, that I was just following orders wasn't a good enough excuse to
Do atrocious things.
yeah, exactly. and I don't think that that there should be an exception for equally atrocious things that are maybe not, when you're taking somebody's property and taking their right to defend themselves, then you're effectively leaving them helpless and at your mercy, and I don't think that's a good thing. And if you're forcing people to do, maybe take a medication that they don't want to take, as good as you feel like that medication may be, it's not your right to force anyone else to take it. And if you're supporting that as law enforcement, then you're definitely violating somebody's bodily autonomy. And in my opinion, you're one of those just following orders guys that well, we saw what happened to the Nazi guards there in the so if you would do that to somebody, I think you kind of deserve the same thing. Um, and so I'm glad to see that the cops are standing up and not doing a lot of that stuff. But to finish this one off, I think the only way that we really find a happy middle on this is to stop expecting so much from law enforcement, to have them stop violent crime, stop property crime, and that be about it as far as using their force. And then we would find plenty of other things for them to do, to help strengthen our society. Again, rescue and clean up and all these different things that they could do to help the community, to where people would trust them again and not tell their kids don't ever talk to the police again, to where people might want to actually say hello to, like Andy Griffith and Barney Fife. There was an episode of Andy Griffith where Barney's wanting to throw the book at this guy or everything, and Andy kind of has to tell him, there's sometimes and I think no Opie is learning about breaking the rules, and Andy has to tell him sometimes you have to break a little rule to save somebody. Like if there was a pond and it said no swimming, but you saw a little boy jump in, and you know you jumped in to save him. Would you rather let him drown or break the rule? So I guess it could boil down to cops do the right thing, even if it is against the rules of a cop. Don't be dragging people in and beating them up for smoking pot. I know it's against the rules for you not to do that, but just leave them alone. They're not hurting anybody. It's really better to break that rule. So to round this one up, let's look at both sides of it. Let's realize that everybody's a human being on this. Let's realize that our society comes from respecting one another, and if we don't, and if we can't talk with one another, then it's just going to be awful for everybody and descend into madness. And the cops may or may not be what prevents that, but I think they've at least shown that they do help, kind of in some ways, keep the order in the civilized society to a degree. Um, may not be the best system, but if we kind of don't expect so much from them and give them more reasonable things to do, I think it'd be a whole lot better. But anyway, that's about all we got for tonight, Dustin. Unless you got anything else to say on it.
Not really.
All right. Well, next week we're going to have a little bit more of a research show. We're going to be talking about the Christmas truce of World War One. And it's kind of going to be a follow-up to this episode, at least the concept of it, because back in World War One at Christmas, and the Germans and the British stopped fighting to do Christmas carols and play soccer. So we're going to get into that next week, and if they can do that, I think we can make the ACABs and the Thin Blue Line people at least get a little closer together. Maybe just for Christmas. Hope so. We'll see you next time, guys. Don't forget to like and share this video. If you like it, it really tickles that algorithm for YouTube. Last time we got, I forget how many views. Like, we usually get somewhere between 50 to 100 on an average video, but we usually only have maybe 5 to 10 people like it. So if you'd give us a like while you're here watching it, we'd really appreciate it. Mm-hmm. I guess I should have said this at the beginning of the video, because a lot of people tune out after the first little bit. But we'd really appreciate if you do that and share this to somebody that you think would like it.
Because everyone always puts, the like, share, subscribe thing, but it does help it somewhat.
Yeah. Well, our views are up. We're up. We're into the thousands of views now. We've got hundreds of hours of view time, and we're getting thousands of impressions on YouTube. So we're actually kicking it up right along and kicking it into gear. The channel's growing. Some more participation would be appreciated, and I really thank you all for watching and for sharing it with the people that you do.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll be back next week, and we'll get into the World War One Christmas truce. See you next time.
Peace.